ourselves. We have failed. We have not been able to do it. Over the last 9 years, we have allocated 14% of our national budget to the Ministry of National Security. So throwing money behind the problem isn't the answer. $63 billion spent over the last 9 years, and crime continues to worsen. It is not getting better. So I think we have to admit that we can't do it ourselves, and I think it is time that we seek international assistance to come into Trinidad and Tobago to help us clean it up. We have to clean it up. We have to clean it up, and then we have to restart and move forward. And you are correct. If we don't, our tourism products are going to be not just tourism, every sector. Again, I was talking about agriculture. The farmers have been so negatively affected by predatory larceny. People are losing their crops to people who think they should just come in and take it. If I were the Prime Minister, I would accept, geez, I can't do this myself. And I don't think regional help is what we need. I think we need international help. And I can't imagine we don't have the means to be able to get that.
I really agree with you when you talk about international help that we need. But for that to happen, it means there has to be an acceptance, in the way you have said it, that we have failed. And there's nothing that is happening in our country that gives me the impression there's an acceptance that we have failed. However, the data is telling us that we have failed. So I certainly think you're quite right. We need international support in order to transform our society away from this crime-ridden one to a society that is easy to function in. There's something I've heard about agriculture, and that people have to pay a tax. And this is not a formal tax to the Ministry of Finance. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that, not just in the agriculture sector, but particularly at the level of the micro enterprises. I've heard of so many businesses that have simply closed their doors. And this is people's means of feeding their family, feeding their children, their little parlors that they have in front of their homes where they're earning a couple of $1,000s in order to make ends meet. And they are being, what's it called? There's a term, it's called protection. It's a protection tax. We've seen doubles vendors close down because of it, outside of the fact that doubles vendors have been targeted, and we've seen so many of them being killed. So yes, this is a real thing that is happening in this country. Gangs are moving into communities, and they are imposing this protection taxes on micro enterprises. And micro and small businesses is the backbone of the economy when it comes to creating jobs. 90% of our businesses are small businesses, Dennise. And if we can't protect them and we can't support their capacity to exist, then again, our ability to turn over money and have money grow and support the development and growth of the economy is something that we're suffering significantly. So yes, crime, and we haven't even talked about the fact that with crime comes the additional cost of doing business, because now you have to put in so much security, whether it's bars, cameras, etc., higher security in larger firms. That's an increased cost of doing business that is now passed on to you and I. These are real things. If we didn't have that kind of environment, even to households, the amount of money that we have to spend on securing our homes and making them jails, really, and we have to keep it in. It's also affected the kind of hours businesses can operate. Traditionally, we had become a country where businesses would open well into the night hours, unless we're seeing that happening because of the fear of banditry. People have to exercise a different kind of control, and that is affecting the entertainment industry in a significant way. Which, again, is a booming industry for Trinidad and Tobago. It was.
Yeah. Can we just double down a little bit on how would you tackle budgeting for safety and security? What could be done? We've talked about the international support. What else could be done, or how will that work?
Dennise, this is something that really confuses me a lot. The Ministry of National Security, like I said, gets the largest chunk. Either the largest or the second largest chunk in our budget. And this has been historic, right? And yet we see things like the police presence is so limited. We're still hearing where the police force is saying they are strapped for resources, for money, they don't have vehicles, etc. Why is it that vehicles that are bought for the police force, why is it their shelf lives are so short relative to the shelf life of a vehicle that you and I may have? Yes, I imagine the demand on it and its usage is a lot heavier. Maybe we're not buying the right types of vehicle. Maybe we need to invest in types of vehicles that are more durable, more rugged, rather than the because you see the police force, driving around in some pretty fancy vehicles, right? That you and I can't afford, right? And that's what they're using for patrol. And maybe that is something that we need to look into at a community level. Maybe we need to look at having police presence within the community using different means. Using now there are these kinds of it's not a motorbike that you're actually going to be pedaling, but that are more technology driven. Maybe at the community level, sitting within a radius, we need to invest in that type of vehicle so that we can feel police presence in a stronger way. We certainly need to do something about how we use to ticket people, which I notice has become a real important aspect of policing, right? Because my understanding from the police is that they can really only stop three people at one time. So only three persons speeding can be caught. And only after they process those three persons can they then go out with the piece of machinery to be able to check who's speeding again. That sounds pretty archaic to me, but that's what we're using. So,
That sounds so backward.
and
That sounds so backward
yeah,
because if you, once you leave this country, and let's say you break a traffic light, you get a ticket. And we've had a number of opportunities in which we've talked about having put in cameras.
mm,
So, what has happened with those cameras? They seem to not be useful. But when we talk about crime, one of the things that my observation is that there isn't enough structure and supervision of the police. I'll give you an example. I often see a police vehicle and the police officers by a particular doubles place in the morning. Now, if they were being supervised, I'm sure, not I'm sure, I hope one of the requirements was you cannot go and buy doubles using the police vehicle. You cannot go and stand up in the line. So a lot of my thoughts are that we do not have the systems, structures, and implementation in place. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with you. There's no accountability. There are no KPIs, key performance indicators. We have been, yeah, I'm sure you were as well as I, we've been calling for that for a very long time. This might sound bad, but look at some of our police officers. Do they look like they could run from here to down the road? Your level of readiness to the job, in terms of your physical readiness to the job, when you look at many of our officers, it doesn't seem like that's a priority. Whereas certainly when we look at police forces in more developed countries, the picture is totally different. So I totally agree with you, Denise. The issue of having key performance indicators, setting up, so this year, what are your targets with respect to, we seem to have targets with respect to ticketing, because that they seem to be good at being out there. And again, putting burden on us. Okay, yeah, I'm not saying that breaking the law at all is to be condoned by no strategy imagination, but I do not understand that priority should be given to checking who might be just 5 or 6 kilometers over the speed limit versus catching the real hardcore criminals, young people with the guns, those persons who are imposing protection taxes on small businesses. It seems, it appears as if we are almost operating without the, what is the word I'm looking for? Help me, Denise. Uh, without without using, I don't know, without using intelligence is
Mhm.
probably the word I'm trying not to use, but it's what I have no choice but to use. We're not doing smart policing. We seem to not be using intelligence in order to support. And then there's this thing that we keep hearing about, the issue of corruption in the police service. Somebody needs to find the testicular or the ovarian fortitude to
Yeah.
deal with this in a meaningful way. We need to be able to trust those who are put in office to protect us. And to a large extent, population in this country feel that we can't. And so it comes back, in my view, Denise, to bringing in international help. And not by that, I don't mean bringing in a foreign police commissioner. I am talking about going to Scotland Yard or going to the relevant, the type of entities in developed countries that can simply deal with the issue that is on the ground that is so bad in Trinidad and Tobago. Because Denise, if we don't clean this up, everything's affected.
Yeah.
Everything.
One of
Everything.
the thoughts that I have had is that the guns that come through our country, we cannot stop that on our own, because those guns are coming from developed countries. That's where they are manufactured. So we need to reach out and collaborate with the developed countries to say, okay, how could we remove that transition of guns, that passing of guns through Trinidad, and not just through Trinidad? It is starting to happen in the rest of the Caribbean. So for me, one of the critical things is how do we transition? How do we move away from having the guns moving from one place to another via our countries?
Well,
You know, so,
herein lies the role for CARICOM, but as we know, CARICOM doesn't do much.
yep, yep, yep,
You
yep.
know, CARICOM again is another entity that needs to be revamped,
Yeah.
reorganized. CARICOM tends to be a place where our retired diplomats go to just enjoy a nice salary, and basically really that does very little. How does it make sense? We have a system in CARICOM where chairman of CARICOM is a 6 month rotation.
Mm-hmm.
6 months. So it's by the time you settle down and you take a breath, it's changed. How can you achieve anything? To me, that's a no-brainer. And you need to fix that. You need to extend the life of the chairman of CARICOM, give them enough time to be able to do something meaningful. So that's just one example. There's so many examples. We've had, for example, CARICOM has this thing with respect to food production. It's, I think, is a 25. There's a term for it. I can't remember it because it's of so little consequence, and we were not feeling it. If it was really important and we were feeling it, it would be on my head. I would be hearing it
You
because
would know it,
we'd
yes.
all be hearing it, Denise, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not. So
Yeah.
it's nice to write a nice to have a plan and you put it down on paper. But the other thing is implementation. And we have an implementation deficit throughout the country, whether we're talking at a country level or we're talking at a regional level. So to come back to the issue of crime, yes, it's increasingly becoming a regional problem. But at a regional level, what are we doing about it collectively in order to bring a stop to it?
Indira, is lovely chatting with you. I didn't know that CARICOM changed, the chairman changes every 6 months.
Mhm.
Clearly, there are no deliverables there. After 6 months, even in voluntary organizations, the chairman of the presidency is 2 years. For example, I have recently become the president of Sir Optimus International of Trinidad and Tobago, and that's a 2 year activity. And I had to be the president elect for 2 years. So it's a 4 year activity in which you have to work through and collaborate on what do you want to achieve. And I'm just using that as a point with regard to the CARICOM chairman moving away after 6 months. But in 6 months, you get to know what the issues are. And then you ought to be able to try to implement or to change them. But I don't know if, as a citizen, we don't have any power. What do we do? How do we encourage people to begin to have conversations about these things? What are your
Well,
thoughts?
Denise, I think we've had so much conversation. We really need action. But unfortunately, Denise, I've been doing this for so long now, Denise. I am a little bit exhausted.
I certainly hope that you can recover, because if too many of us become exhausted, it will not transition. So I
Well,
said,
I am here this morning and I will be on TV6 this afternoon. I will be on another radio station. So I will continue to, obviously, Denise. I can't stop because if I stop in my head, I'll probably go crazy because my concern for this country is so significant and I keep it just in my head all the time. I really lose sleep over the fact that there are young people in this country and we're not generating jobs for them. New jobs, Denise, new jobs. We're not. We're talking about extending the life of the retirement age, which is a good thing if it's a country where that growth is taking place, where new job opportunities are being created. Now, doing it simply in order to address the challenge you have in your pension system is not a good, it's not enough of a reason. Because if we keep persons who are current retirement age, if we keep them on for another 5 years and we're not creating new jobs, it means there are no existing opportunities being opened up for those who are now coming out of school to be able to fill. That's a reality. And this economy, we're not focused on job creation. Recently, in the US, the Fed they finally reduced their equivalent of the repo rates, the bank rates.
Yeah.
First time since COVID. They had been keeping it high in order to address the issue of inflation. Inflation, they believe, is finally under control, but they understand that if they maintain the high bank rate, it's now affecting the labor market. So job creation is going to slow down significantly. So they need to drop that rate in order to stimulate business, encourage businesses to borrow money to grow, to continue to generate employment, because they are not going to compromise the generation and the creation of new employment. That is a data point that you can get every month in the United States in terms of how much new jobs were created. We don't have that in Trinidad and Tobago. Even if we did, the answer is clear. We are not generating new job opportunities. And it is not just the new job opportunities, Denise. It needs to be a country that is growing, where in your job you can be enjoying increases in your wages and salaries in order to deal with the issue of inflation. Because inflation doesn't go down, Denise, just the rate of increase changes. So when we are now saying, oh my God, inflation, we've now brought it down to 2% or that, it doesn't mean that prices have come down. It means the rate of increase of prices has slowed down. And people very often don't understand that. So people are hearing, oh my God, the inflation rate is coming down. But when they go to the grocery, they're still seeing that every time I go and I spend the money, I'm coming home with less.
Yeah. So the person in the maxi listening to this and asking themselves, so inflation is going up, so that I have to go to the supermarket and go to the grocery, and wherever I go, I'm just spending more money. Is that the interpretation of it?
Yes, that is the interpretation of it. And if you ask me what's my advice to them, I might be encouraged to say, like many of our leaders say, plant a kitchen garden. But Denise, that's not easy. Planting kitchen garden is hard work. It also costs money. Plant organic. You have any idea how difficult planting organic is?
And
Because we
one
live.
of my observations about trying to plant is that you can try to plant and you start to get tomatoes, and then all of a sudden something happens and something attacks them, and all the tomatoes you thought you were going to get have just disappeared and
Yeah,
died.
correct. Or you
Hmm.
plant the tree and it's coming beautiful and it's gotten nice and tall, and just at the point where you think, oh my God, it's going to start to flower. And you get up one morning, all the leaves are curling. All the leaves are curling because some kind of worm has affected it and all of that. So
Yes.
yes, it's not easy. Plus, people are working two jobs sometimes, mother and husband and wife working and barely seeing their kids. Where are they going to find the time to come home and then plant a kitchen garden? And then we have all these programs where we give people seedlings. You give them seedlings, but you're not giving them the soil and all the other supplements that the plants need in order to make the plant grow. So you're telling them, now you got to go spend all that money. So half of the time, Denise, between you and I, it is much better to let the farmers do what they know to do best and go to the market and get, because let me tell you something, home gardening is not cost effective. I have tried it and I will try, because it has all the other benefits of healthy living and doing your physical activity and that sense of satisfaction you get when you plant your thing and you reap it and whatever. So there are those benefits. And then how many things can I plant? So I plant tomato, but that's not all I will eat. So I get all of this set of tomatoes and I have to give it away because I can't use all of it. I'll freeze some of it, but at the end, I still have to go to the market. So let us support our farmers in a more meaningful. Let's. I may be harping on the agriculture thing, but Denise, are we serious about food production? When over the last 9 years, we have allocated 1.6% of our national budget to agriculture. On average, the agriculture sector gets on average about $750 million. And last year in the budget, it got a little bit more. Through when you add the minister added on a 500 million for some special, and we don't know what happened with that. But around $750 million what we allocate to agriculture. Even though we are saying food security is a priority, we given the agriculture sector 750 million. Out of that, 90% goes to recurrent expenditure to pay wages and salaries of all the technocrats, etc. We're left with about we'll have put about $75 million to grow the sector. No wonder it contributes as a 1% to GDP. Last year, 2023, Dennise, this stats review of the economy, okay? This is not Dr. Sagewan just trying to make story, okay? I'm not making story. Go read it. The review of the economy tells you the agriculture sector, it contributes less than 0.5% to GDP, by the way. Less than half of 1%. It contracted again in 2023. Out of that, cocoa, which is supposed to be our pride and joy, we fine flavor cocoa, we have policy documents, we talking all kinds of things. Cocoa production moved from, and I want you to listen to this figure, 85,000 kilograms 2022 to 8.5 kilograms in 2023.
Come on, say that again.
Yeah, 85,000 kilograms in 2022 to 8.5 kilograms in 2023. Review of the economy. Go and look at it. But more than that, Dennise, in the 1930s, we were producing over 36,000 tons of cocoa for the export markets.
All right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to talk to the person in the maxi and explain that to them in a way that they will understand, because you're saying in the 30s, it was so significant. So just give us another way of explaining that.
We had oil, we destroyed the agricultural sector. It's as plain as simple as that. Once oil and gas money start to flow, we give very little credence or emphasis on any of these very important sectors. And even though we mount commitment to it and say, okay, we need to do this, we need to grow tourism, we need to grow all of these things, that could create jobs. Tourism, the amount of jobs tourism can create at the lower levels of our society, Dennise, we're talking about in the thousands, okay? And we're simply not supporting it for that to happen. Tourism in Trinidad and Tobago equals carnival.
Yes.
Full stop.
Yes.
And while carnival is important, and I will not dismiss it at all, we have not been able to transition and transform this tourism sector in the kind of meaningful way that we need to. And we have natural endowment that can allow us to do, but we have not. So back to the gentleman and the lady in the maxi taxi, we are not producing the food that we need for you and I to eat, because these people who are producing it are not getting the support they need in order to be able to do it. Most of our cocoa estates have been abandoned. There are a few people, and most of them family-owned farms, where the individuals have gone into their farms, they have rehabilitated it, they are producing their cocoa, and they've done the chocolate course at the university, they're producing their bars of chocolate. But most of it is sold in the local market, Dennise. Mm-hmm. Because in order to export chocolate, we need to do it at a scale that allows us to be able to send a reefer container. And we can't send it this month, and we can't send it the next month or the next month. In order to be able to do that, we have to be producing the beans in a sustainable manner in order to feed into the production of the chocolates, in order to be able to have the reefer going out every 1 month or every other month, etc. We need to organize the sector in a more meaningful way. We have a type of cocoa that is called fine flavor cocoa that is high, that its health benefits are very significant, and we should be using it in terms of support. We've been talking about health and wellness, and that has been a new growth sector that we've been talking about for a long time. We can feed our cocoa products into that sector because it can be used to produce, face products, body products that are high in antioxidants. Even the eating of our products that we produce using our cocoa has health benefits because of the nature. We've not leveraged this. What's the role of university? What's the role of CARICOM? Why we have institutions that should be pushing these things from a research perspective in a much stronger manner, but there's a disconnect, Dennise, between a development agenda and the institutions that we have, and they don't speak to each other very often, and everybody operates in their silo and do what they feel is important, but not what redounds to the benefit of the country. But I also want to say, Dennise, before we go on another topic, our food import bill is $6 billion TT because people in the maxi taxi, because you and I and Denise, we are the ones who are buying the imported food. If we weren't buying the foreign mangoes, even though we have mangoes falling off our trees, if we weren't buying the avocados in the supermarkets, which when you cut it, it's black and you don't know how to use it, if we weren't buying it, they couldn't be bringing it in. You go sometimes in the supermarket and the iceberg lettuce is half rotting and they're still selling it for 20 something dollars. And they could keep the price there because some fool is going to go and pick it up and buy it.
So then, what is the message to the person in the maxi? Because you're saying that we're buying rotten mangoes. Now, that surprised me because I didn't think we imported mangoes.
You know the big, beautiful ones that you see sometimes? It's like what we call Graham mango.
A Graham mango,
Yeah,
yes.
it's
Those are
imported.
imported.
You must say it's your sticker on it. Yeah, just like you see the sticker on the avocado.
On the avocado.
Sometimes you see on the side of the road is selling the avocados and you think, oh my God, this has to be local. You know, it's not, right? Because what are we doing in order to shore up? We have some of the best avocados in a country that have probably the widest range of avocados and mangoes. Where are the farms that we are supporting in order to grow it in a manner that we can use it for value adding, rather than having it just fall off the trees and then we have to import? That's a disconnect that I am talking about. And then if we don't have enough, we could then source it from Guyana. So here is a regional approach. And Suriname, these are countries with massive land space, and we should all be talking in terms of how do we collaborate to see agriculture from farm to supermarket shelf or wherever else being produced in a way where it's a complete product, even though primary might be taking place in Guyana and value adding or manufacturing in Trinidad. It's a complete project where both parties have equal share.
Yeah.
So Guyana doesn't say, what the hell, why I must only produce the primary product and get cents for the dollar, and Trinidad you manufacturing and you making the big money. No, that is it as a complete project where those who are investing from the farm to the final manufacturing, bringing together the investors from a Guyana, from a Trinidad and Tobago, and having those kinds of projects. That is my vision in terms of how this thing needs to be done, Denise. And I strayed from another important point I was trying to make, which I know I can't remember. But the message I'm trying to send here is power. You talked about people power. The power is in our hand. You asked me what should do. Go to the Tunapuna market and the Shagonas market and the farmers market. And there are so many deals to be had in these places, Denise. Maybe we should collaborate and we should go to the market and we should show people how to buy, how to use it a little bit. I was in the market yesterday, and for enough pumpkin, and he already sliced it up. All I have to do now is come home and just peel off the skin, and it's ready to cook because he's cut it. And this big heater could probably feed a family of 5 if you make some rice with it or some roti. $5. $5, Denise.
Yeah. I had an experience about 4 weeks ago where I was going to Sandy Grande and I stopped at a vegetable in front of a house, and I spent $100 on vegetables. Right now, I still have frozen pumpkin in my deep freeze because of what I bought and the amount of stuff that I got for a little bit of money. And nothing that I bought had a label on it. So it was all things man own.
Now, I have to tell you, some of it could come from the islands, right? But I'm okay with that. I am okay with supporting CARICOM because our manufactured goods go to these islands. When you go to these islands and you go into the supermarket, you're seeing the things that are produced in Trinidad and Tobago on their shelf. So they're buying what we are producing. I don't see it unless I go into a West Indian shop in the United States. I'm not seeing our product in any one of the Whole Foods and the I can't remember, Food Town and all of those things. I'm not seeing our produce here, but those things are all over our supermarket shelves, right? So I'm good with the fact that my ginger comes from the small islands, my provision, my plantains. I am good with that because we're a Caribbean community that must support each other. Okay, Denise? So I'm good with that. But also, a lot of people I know don't have a deep freeze, right? There was a while where I just simply did away with mine too. but I recently did buy back a very small one because when things are cheap, I have the opportunity, like on my provisions, to buy tomatoes, peppers, pimentos, and put it in the deep freeze. And therefore, I have it to use when the price of tomatoes go to $25, $30 a pound, and I'm using out of the freezer. So for those who can afford to have a little freezer, if your fridge is big enough and you can allocate some of your freezing space, these are some of the things that you do in order to be able to keep your price. And listen, I'm Dr. Sagewan, yeah, right? Fancy title and all of that. But I live what I preach. I rarely buy things in a can. Very rarely do I buy things in a can, unless it's like tuna, spicy tuna or something. But I am in this tuna puna market every Sunday morning or in one of the farmers markets because I support local, I support farmers because I know where that money is going. It's going to the farmers who could then use that money to educate their children, who are my children, our children.
There's something you said that we buy the imported stuff. And my thought on that is that we buy it because it's available. So why wouldn't the government stop the importation of some things, of a lot of stuff? And if you did that, then some of us will understand the difference between the imported and the locally produced.
We can't stop the importation, Denise. That's why I started the conversation by saying import higher taxes. And remember, we're operating at global sphere where we're members of the WTO. We get there's so many issues, so many protocols that we must follow, right? But there are ways to get around it. There are ways to get around it. We can impose what we call, okay, so if we can't impose, we can't impose higher duties on it, we could say, okay, we don't want things that have that's not produced within 2 weeks entering our market. Think about it. When we buy imported lettuce, that imported lettuce has been produced in a mega farm and then trucked cross country to a simple port, then stayed and then shipped to us, then cleared. That lettuce that we're buying is weeks old, Denise. And we're happy. And when you think about it, weeks old, and yet we could put it in our fridge, and it could last probably the next couple of weeks. Could you imagine the chemical content in that for it to last that length of time? Are we happy like Papi to buy it? But we don't want to buy the local lettuce because it have no shelf life in a couple of days. But it doesn't have shelf life because it's more natural and of a higher value for our bodies than it is the thing that we're importing. So maybe education, Denise, is another important element. So what we do is we use what we call non-tariff barriers. So non-taxation. So we set some rules in terms of what we will let come into our country. Chicken is another interesting case in point, Denise. I don't know if some of the chicken that you eat when you go maybe to a restaurant, particularly in the fast food area, is imported chicken that could be over 5, sometimes over 10 years old. Because
Come on, Indira.
I'm not joking, Denise. I'm serious. I'm serious. Because
10 years old, you said.
let's take the United States, for example, right?
Yeah.
They don't like dark chicken. The demand is for white chicken, which is the breast meat. They like wings. So they cut off the leg and thigh and they freeze it and then they dump it on us. So they sell it real cheap to the developing world. They sell it real cheap to us. And yeah, and that's when you go sometimes and you get you buy a wing and the wing looks like the size of a big drumstick. Really? That could be a 5 or 6-year-old piece of meat that you're eating.
Indira, you're making me feel so sad today. While I'm laughing, I'm
I
sad.
know, but this is the reality. So my point, Denise, is when you say and we've lowered the taxes on that because the restaurant industry has called because they say the local chicken is too expensive, right? But if the local chicken, which has a high import content because they're importing everything, is expensive, and now you are having them compete with this cheaper chicken, it is very difficult for them to be able to grow, right? So that you have to set some policy. So if the WTO prevents you from being able, because chicken is chicken, and they say, although I would argue that chicken that's being imported is not the same chicken that we produce locally. So it's not same with same. So I can argue, okay, so increasing the duties on the imported thing. But if you don't want to do that, say, okay, limit the age of the chicken that can be imported into Trinidad. I did, and this is throughout the Caribbean. I did a study in Suriname, and when I spoke to the local poultry association, and they showed me a chicken that was imported coming from some country. There wasn't even, the labeling wasn't even in English, so you don't even know what it's saying because it's coming from God alone. What knows what country it was coming in from? But we're a developing country, and if you develop world thing, they could slap anything onto us, and they can if we allow them. If
Yes.
we have developing country mentality and we don't want to look after ourselves, Denise, then we're in trouble. We haven't even talked about the issue of GMO. Now the jury is out on whether GMO and the kind of impact that it is having on our bodies. But give me a damn choice. Sorry, I shouldn't use that word on your. Give me a choice. I need to know if the food I'm consuming is natural or if it's GMO. Most of the seeds that are imported that we are using to plant is GMO seeds.
Yes. Could you explain GMO?
Oh, yeah. GMO is genetically modified. It means that these seeds are being created in a lab. So it's a long time. So, in the simplest of language, long time, right? When our grandfathers and grandmothers plant corn, they would let a certain amount dry on the field and then they would keep the seeds, and that those are called legacy seeds. And then next year they would have their seeds, whether it's okra or corn or whatever, then they'd have the seeds to plant the next year and the next year. We used to have a seed bank in Chagaramas, which I think was shut down. And that is the most pristine and the best place that we should have this seed bank, because you want to make sure that your seeds don't get contaminated, because they can easily get contaminated by things in the environment. We basically destroy that in order to support the importation of genetically modified seeds in this country. That's what we have done in order to support, again, buying from the rest of the world and distributing, supporting basically, and it's almost a monopoly situation in that regard, Denise. We have allowed that to diminish. So I really like corn, right? Love corn, but I grew up as a young girl and love our corn. I hate Canadian sweet corn. I don't like it. It's too sweet. So every time I see corn on the side of the road, I will stop and buy it. And I would buy it and I will boil it and it has no taste.
Mm.
And if I happen to keep it one day, it's dimpled and it's looking if it's not good anymore. And I can't understand why. Until one day, the gentleman I was buying the corn from, because I asked him, I said, listen, I'm tired of buying, looking, because I want this corn I used to have when I was a child. When I could buy it and you roast it and you could take your finger and you could feg off the grains and it is so sweet. He says, ma'am, I have to tell you, all the corns you're getting in the country right now is GMO. Fully modified. That's what we plant in. We
Yeah.
no longer, he said, for you to get that, you have to go somewhere deep in the country and find some farmer who has been maintaining those seeds. And
Yes. So,
that's
Indira,
the reason why GMOs are concerned, because, like I said, we don't know what the health impact is on our bodies. The
yeah.
incidence of cancer, Denise, it has so proliferated in Trinidad and Tobago. We have one of the highest rates of cancers in the whole world. It's especially breast cancer, it's very high.
Yes.
And could there be a link between that and the foods that we're eating? I really strongly believe so. I'm not in the science of determining that, and I think that is an area we need to focus on. The Minister of Finance was lamenting how much money he has to spend on healthcare. Well, if we step back a little bit and start to examine what are the things that are getting us sick, and we start to do the things that are necessary in order to have a healthier society, and if our leaders lead the way, the Minister of Health should be running a 5K with us every weekend. Not necessarily a 5K, just a walk around the
Just a
savannah.
walk around the savannah.
Just
Yes.
a walk around the savannah.
Indira,
Invite us.
Indira,
Let's come and join you.
as
Right?
we as we come to an end of this conversation,
Are
there's
we at the
three.
end already, Denise?
Yes, we just have an hour, but thank you ever so much for giving me an hour of your time. There are three areas that we have discussed. We've discussed forex, we've discussed agriculture, and we've discussed crime. If you could create a miracle and find one thing in the budget today, what would that be?
I'm an eternal optimist, but I'm also a realist. I've become very realistic and very practical. So I have no expectation there'll be any magic bullet, any budget. I expect on sorry, Denise, I have to answer how I can best answer. My expectation is going to be an election budget, because traditionally any government that's in office just before election, they use it as a tool in order to finance what it needs to convince those who are its core supporters that things are great. So we will see a lot happening in construction, etc., etc., because that's the fastest way to put some money in people's hands in order for them to believe, and the government you need to vote for, so that the next 5 years would happen. There's no quick fix to these problems, Dennise. I want to be realistic. So I can't tell you what I can't tell you. No quick fix. Yes, it requires hard work, commitment, dedication, but more than that, political will, Dennise, to reverse the trend that the Trinidad and Tobago currently is on. The Prime Minister is only the day before is telling us the next until 2027 is going to be hard times. But he can't tell us only to 2027 because he's hoping that the dragon will come to pass. But let's assume the dragon does come to pass, Denise. But by then, the world has so shifted that the taxes on imported goods, like Europe already, has put in place an import tax where they are taxing goods and services that are produced using fossil fuel as a source of energy. What we produce is fossil fuel.
Yes.
So if it is increasingly difficult to import, and Europe is a huge market, if the United States does the same thing, if China does the same thing, what we will be seeing very rapidly is the demand for fossil fuel declining because people simply can't use it because the world is changing very rapidly. And that is the kind of what we need to be hearing going forward. So if, and outside of that, if God forbid the dragon doesn't happen, what happens to us?
What happens to us? Indira, I don't know. And in a way, you don't know as well. But my hope is that we will begin to take the small steps to transition our country away from the dependency on fossil fuel. And my other hope for this country is that we will transition away from the level of corruption that occurs throughout the country. So, Indira, thank you very much. What is your parting word?
My parting word is we have to remain hopeful. We have to, those of us who have a voice have to continue speaking. Those of you who have not used your voice yet, it is time that you started to use your voice. My parting word is as a people, we need to come together and we need to start in a much stronger way to hold our governments to account. We can't just get all excited about an issue at budget time. That's the only time we all come alive and we want to, because we want to know whether the price of gas is going to go up. No, it's more than that. We have to, in between, we have to hold our government to account to deliver the things that we require in order to have a better quality of life.
Thank you ever so much, Indira. And that brings us to an end of